Labour Party on a European referendum is now entirely mysterious, isn't it?
No, I don't think so, Gordon. Ed Miliband has been quite clear with regard to this. We favour being within Europe. However, we recognise with the increasing size of Europe that if there are more powers that are going to go to Brussels, then we recognise that and there will be an in-out referendum. We're quite happy to do that.
What does that mean, if more powers go to Brussels?
Well, we don't know what that means yet until we know what the increasing size of the Eurozone is going to look like, but only then. But we are quite clear that we want to ensure that the Labour Party will lock Britain's position with regard to no more powers going to Brussels. We're quite content to allow the British people
I thought your position was actually that if there were more powers which led to changes in the European treaties, you would want a referendum. Have I misunderstood that?
No.
So therefore there could be more powers go to Europe, as long as they're not actually treaty changes.
No, I mean, you're misinterpreting what I'm saying. What we don't, the premise of your question is wrong. We don't actually know what those more powers are. What we are prepared to accept is that the will of the British people might be that more powers going to Brussels will cause trouble. It will cause a dilution perhaps of the United Kingdom's position within Europe, and we want to ensure that we have a strong position within Europe, albeit that we want to ensure that no more powers are going across to Europe.
I'm not sure I understand what that means. Stephen Gethin, let's try you. If we vote for independence, can we have a referendum on whether or not to stay in Europe?
Well, let's focus on one referendum at a time, shall we? We've got a referendum in a few months' time, and if Scotland votes,
you just heard the film there. The SNP.
If Scotland votes for independence in a few months' time, Scotland gets something it's never had before in Europe, and that's a government that stands up for its interests. I mean, it was interesting to hear Ian Duncan talking about
wouldn't
fisheries.
Standing up for Scotland's interest, wouldn't the first thing you could then do is say, right, we'll have a referendum on whether or not we should be in the European Union?
Well, wait a minute,
what exactly is the argument against?
Let's take it one referendum at a time, okay?
No, I'm not suggesting you don't have your independence referendum first. I'm saying if you win the independence referendum, what precisely and exactly is the argument, if it's going to be this great explosion of democracy, for refusing to give the people of Scotland the right to decide on the first big thing which is going to confront them, which is whether or not to be a member of the European Union?
Well, look, the first thing the Scottish Government will do will be to have a general election. That will be the first thing that people can do. And I think what we want to do is, rather than follow the UK Government's lead, which is to remarkably lose friends and influence across Europe, is to have a Scottish Government that stands up for Scottish interests, not a UK Government that fails to do so. In fact, Ian Duncan brought up fisheries anymore. It was a Tory government that described our fisheries as expendable in the broader European context. A Scottish Government could never get away with that.
Right, so your answer to my question, would we, if we vote for independence, have the right to a referendum on whether or not to stay in the European Union, is that you don't like Tory policy on fish?
No, my view is we have a Scottish Government that makes the most of our relationship with Europe. Personally, I don't think we should have an in-out referendum. I think we have to make the most of our relationship with Europe. I mean, in Scotland, everybody else is dancing to a UKIP tune, but in Scotland, UKIP haven't even saved their deposit in an election yet. Let's get in there and make the best job, and for once, get a good deal out of Europe.
Right. Okay. Chas Booth, I'm not quite sure what the Greens' policy is on referendums in Europe.
Well, I think your own piece there, Gordon, identified that there's no real appetite for it. Scots are overwhelmingly in favour of our membership of the European Union. They recognise
Well, hang on, they're not overwhelmingly. They are by a majority, but what the pollster also said was that a majority in Scotland would be in favour of an in-out referendum.
I don't see the value in an in-out referendum when we know that the result will be a yes vote. I think your piece there said 60% of Scots are in favour of EU membership. They recognise that considerable numbers of Scots' jobs come from our membership of the European Union, and they recognise that the European Union has brought us considerable environmental protections and social protections as well. I mean, in contrast, the Tories said that they want to cut back on our social protection. As Greens, we think we need more protections. We want to see a European Union that stands up for the interests of workers rather than the interests of big business. We crucially want to see a welcoming Europe that welcomes migrants and immigrants, that values their presence.
But you don't think we should have the right to decide whether we want to be part of that or not?
What I'm saying, Gordon, is I don't think there's any appetite for that. There is an overwhelming support for membership of the European Union. We want to see...
The pollsters just told you there was an appetite for that.
There was an appetite for being asked, but when asked, people overwhelmingly say, yes, we support membership of the European Union.
Well, but by the same logic, we wouldn't be having a referendum on independence, would we? Because in the polls, most people say no, so what's the point of asking them when, according to your logic, we know the answer already?
The polls for the September referendum
You're supposed to be in favour of a yes vote.
I am very much in favour of a yes vote, and I look forward to an independent Scotland taking its place around the